I still remember September 11th, 2001. Maybe you remember that day. Well, I was in elementary school. I still remember it. I know it's hard to believe. Well, suddenly our whole school closed down for the day. And me and my siblings got in my mom's van, and we were so excited to get to go home and get out of school early. And my mom turned around with a very serious face and said, "This is not a day to celebrate. Something terrible has happened to America." And we drove home not celebrating, but quietly and somberly. I still remember the beginning of 2020. I was actually set to go watch my dad's basketball team at the time, Oklahoma. My dad's a basketball coach. In the NCAA tournament. I was so excited. And then they said they were going to only allow family members and friends to attend the tournament because of COVID. And then I was really excited. I was like, I'm going to get to sit wherever I want. And then they shut down the whole thing. The church I was at, I was interning at, and unprecedentedly, I don't know if that's a word, they closed their Sunday services, which I'd never experienced. And so the church closed down. So maybe you remember where you were at when COVID struck. Maybe for you it's something personal though. Maybe one day you woke up and you got news or you got a call that forever changed your life. Or maybe you went to the doctor for a routine checkup and you got a health report back that forever changed everything. The Bible calls these events time and chance. These unpredictable events in life that can happen at any time, that sometimes lead us to live our lives with a low hum of anxiety because of the uncertainty in this world. But here's the reason God allows it to be this way. And this is the take-home message. Time and chance redirect my trust. These unpredictable events that happen to us, there's only one person they're not unpredictable to, that is God. And what these events do, these unpredictable events, is they take our trust off of ourselves, off of other people, off of institutions, off of this world, and they place our trust squarely in the only place it should really be, with the Lord, who controls the events of time and chance. This passage is the only place we see this phrase, time and chance, in our Bibles. So that's what we're going to talk about, and we're going to start with this, time and chance explained. Look at verses 11 and 12 with me. "Again, I saw that under the sun the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge, but time and chance happen to them all. For man does not know his time. Like fish that are caught in an evil net, or like birds that are caught in a snare, so the children of man are snared at an evil time when it suddenly falls upon them." Solomon begins here by observing the fact that the fastest person won't always win the race. Sports would be really boring if the best team always won, but that's not the way the world is. In battles, the battles aren't always won by the strongest army. The wise and intelligent don't always get the most rich. And the reason for all these things, Solomon says, is because time and chance happen to them all. So I want to get started here by giving you a biblical definition of time and chance, courtesy of Bible Hub. Here's a definition: the unpredictable elements of life that happen to everyone, regardless of status, wisdom, or righteousness. In this context, it may refer to the sudden pressures and dangers of life. So the reason we would say in this context it refers to the sudden pressures and dangers of life is because in verse 12, it says, man does not know his time. So one of the parts of the definition of this phrase is that we don't know when these things are going to happen. They just fall upon us. They come upon us like a fish caught in a net, like a bird caught in a snare. You ever had a year like that where it's like when it rains, it pours, bad thing after bad thing seems to happen? Well, that's part of what Solomon's talking about here. So I was trying to think of some 21st century examples of time and chance. You'll see these up on the screen. So I already mentioned the September 11th attacks. Just forever changed our country, forever changed air travel, forever changed New York City. Ended up going into certain wars in the Middle East because of those events. Like, it just changed the 21st century. Another big one was Apple releasing the first iPhone. Now, maybe some people understood how big a deal that would be and how it would change the world. I didn't. I didn't realize that now every time I go to a restaurant, everybody's like this instead of talking to each other. Or every once in a while when I'm preaching, you're like this, and I know what you're doing. I see you better than you think. But phones have changed how we shop. They've changed how we think. They've changed how we learn. So that would be a big event of time and chance. Another big one was the 2008 financial crisis. If you're young, that probably doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you're old enough, that had a big impact on your bank account maybe. It changed the financial markets. And then 2020, I mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic obviously changed the entire world. Now, maybe you're thinking, Billy, what about all the political elections? What about all the political events? What about Hurricane Katrina, right? There's so many other things we could name. And if we went to the 20th century, we could name World War I, World War II, Vietnam, the entire 60s. So there's many events that would fall into this category, but hopefully you get the idea of what Solomon's talking about. We also get biblical examples of time and chance, and I was trying to think of some of the great stories of the events of time and chance. The first one would be Joseph. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of the story of Joseph. So Joseph was his father's favorite son, but not his brother's favorite brother. And his brothers sold him secretly into slavery. Talk about the sudden pressures and dangers of life coming upon young Joseph. So now Joseph was in Egypt, and he was under a man named Potiphar, and he was honoring the Lord. But again, the wheels of time and chance turned against him. It's said in the Bible that Joseph was a good-looking young man, and somebody noticed that, Potiphar's wife. And Potiphar's wife made sexual advances at Joseph, which he rejected. And as you can imagine, she wasn't thrilled about that, and she falsely accused him of sexual misconduct. He was thrown in prison. So man, the first 30 years of Joseph's life, pretty rough. This guy is honoring the Lord, and yet time and time again, it feels like everything goes against him. Joseph was in prison for 2 years. I like to think of that time in his life as if an iron righteousness and trust in God entered his soul, because he continued to walk with God through all the tough circumstances. And then one day, the wheels of time and chance turned again. The Lord put a dream in Pharaoh's heart. That dream had to do with a famine that was coming, and there was only one person in the whole kingdom of Egypt who knew the interpretation to the dream. Who was it? It's Joseph. And so Joseph interpreted the dream, and in one day he went from the prison to the palace, and he became second in command of all Egypt. Now, when you get to the end of Genesis, there's this emotional reunion between Joseph and his brothers, and this is one of the great verses on the idea of time and chance. This is what Joseph said to his brothers. "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." So why did God do this with Joseph? To preserve his people. It saved his family from a famine. And so one of the benefits of reading about these stories in the Bible is we get the benefit of hindsight. Time always makes things seem a little clearer, a little simpler. But we don't always get those answers in this life, do we? Or right away when we're in these events. Here's another story about time and chance in the Bible. This is the story of Ruth. So there was a woman named Naomi who was from Judea, and she was forced to leave her homeland to go to a place called Moab because of a famine. And while she was there with her husband, Elimelech, got that one right. I was practicing that name all week. Elimelech and her 2 sons and her daughters-in-law, time and chance struck Naomi. All the men in their life died in a time where men provided for women. Her husband Elimelech died, her 2 sons died, and Naomi went home and she said, "Call me Mara, because I am bitter. The Lord has dealt bitterly with me." But one of her daughters-in-law, it says, clung to her, and her name was Ruth. And Naomi and Ruth in their homeland experience now the favor of the Lord. God brought Ruth into a field of a righteous and rich man named Boaz, and Boaz showed unusual kindness to Ruth. And again, the rest is history. I could tell you the whole story. It'd take a long time, but the point is they got married. And after they got married, I love this verse in Ruth 4:17. It says, the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, the son, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. Interestingly. And they named him Obed. And he was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David. And of course, David was in the lineage of Christ. So when you read those genealogies in your Bible and you always want to skip over them, just look at some of the stories in that genealogy. You see God moving through time and chance. All right, here's my last Bible story, Esther. Esther is one of the great stories of time and chance. In fact, God's name never shows up in the book of Esther. And one commentator said, never is God anywhere more present than when his name is not mentioned. That's very true about the book of Esther. God is moving behind the scenes in that book. Maybe you know the story, but if you don't, here you go. So Esther was a beautiful woman. She was said to be beautiful in form and appearance. And so when King Xerxes in the kingdom of Persia, which was ruling over the Jews at the time, when he went to look for a new queen because he was unhappy with the other queen, Esther found favor with King Xerxes and she became Queen Esther. But she didn't just become Queen Esther to sit around in the palace and say, boy, I'm so blessed, I'm so pretty. That wasn't the point. God had a plan for Esther. Because there was a wicked man named Haman who wanted to exterminate the entire Jewish race. Have we ever seen that before? So this Haman wanted to exterminate the Jews, and Esther was put there by God to deliver the Jewish people. Now, King Xerxes, if anybody came into his presence unannounced or without being invited, he could put them to death. And so Esther was afraid to go into the presence of King Xerxes, and her godly uncle Mordecai said this, Esther, if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish, because who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. That's that famous line from Esther, for such a time as this. So through Esther's influence, Haman was put to death. The Jews were delivered. Now, if you're in a life group here at our church, for the study guide I make each week after the sermons, I've put a question in there that says, name as many biblical examples as you can of these stories of time and chance. So I just say that to say there's many more, but those are three that we see in the Bible. So coming out of this point, I hope you know what we're talking about. We're talking about these unpredictable events that happen to us in life that are part of our lives. And Solomon is now going to give us a short story of time and chance. So look at verses 13 through 18 with me. Time and chance illustrated. He says, I have also seen this example of wisdom under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city with few men in it, and a great king came against it and besieged it, building great siege works against it. But there was found in it a poor, wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city, yet no one remembered that poor man. But I say that wisdom is better than might, though the poor man's wisdom is despised and his words are not heard. The words of the wise heard in quiet are better than the shouting of a ruler among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. So Solomon, after he's given us this example of how these difficult situations in life suddenly fall upon us, he's talking now about a city that this happened to in verse 14. Notice the contrast in verse 14. There's a city, a little city with few men in it, and a great king with great siege works being built against it. Who's going to win? Well, you would think the great king with the great army, but that's not what happens. There was this poor, wise man. I kind of just like to picture a little poor, wise man walking around, really wise, and never mind. Walking around, really wise, understands how to handle things, but nobody ever listens to him. But now the city is desperate because if that army breaks in that day, terrible things would happen to those people. So they are in trouble. But this poor, wise man delivers the city by his wisdom. And do they lift him up like Rudy in that football movie and carry him around? No. It says that nobody even remembered it was him. His wisdom is despised. His words are not heard. So the city just goes on. And Solomon's point here is made in verse 16. He says, I tell you that wisdom is better than might. The world values power and might and boasting and bigness. They value the great king with the great siege works. But what happens when the events of time and chance come along is often the events of time and chance tear all that down. They tear all that bluster down. And the people who typically survive those seasons are people like the poor wise man, the quiet, wise person who has the protection of wisdom. That's Solomon's point here. In verse 17, he's just making the point that there is an enduring value to wisdom, a power to quiet influence. And in verse 18, he's making the point that people who despise wisdom and despise righteousness come to defeat or come to be destroyed in times of time and chance. So in this last point here, I want to move to the last point. We're going to call this time and chance applied. I want to take the lessons of verses 11 through 18, and I also just want to take lessons from the rest of Ecclesiastes to just give you some take-home lessons about living in a world of time and chance because we can't escape it. Here's the first lesson. I cannot always win, but I can always be wise. In verse 11, when it said that the race is not always won by the swift or the battle is not always won by the strong, what Solomon is saying is that life's not fair. I could go through this whole week and prepare a message as hard as I can, and then I might get allergies on Sunday morning. Or I might not sleep well. Or there might be a distraction in the congregation, or my mic might go out, or something might happen to the slides. So I can't control that. I can't always win, and if you can win in a sermon, I can't always win, but I can always be wise. My dad, you know this by now, he's a basketball coach. But what we do on game days, we have this tradition where I'll call him and we'll pray together. And both of us know, and God knows too, that what we really want to pray for is a win. Because his paycheck is literally determined by wins and losses. But we've tried to get away from that, and we've tried to instead pray that the Lord would give him wisdom as a coach, that the team would have a good day of preparation, that my dad would be a good advocate to the head coach of the team. And often the verse I cite is Proverbs 21:31, which says, the horse is made ready for the day of battle, but the victory belongs to the Lord. So you can do everything in your power and still lose. That's the tough thing about life. But what I have found is if I do my job in the preparation, in the process, over time, you'll win a lot. Things will go really well. And even coming back to the sermon, it's so funny. Sometimes I walk away on Sunday morning after I prepared a lot and I go, man, that went so bad. And then I'll hear 3 or 4 people go, but that changed my life. And then sometimes I'll walk away and go, man, that's my best sermon of all time. I am God's gift to Prairie Bible Church. I don't actually ever say that, just to be clear. And then nobody comes up to me. So the point is, I have no idea what the results are of these types of things. I just don't. And if that's what I think about, I'll go crazy. So what this verse in Ecclesiastes 9:11 does for me is it shifts my focus away from the result to the process, to being diligent, to being prepared, to living wisely. And over time, if you do that, you'll win a lot. That's the lesson. All right, here's the next lesson. I cannot always understand, but I can always trust God. If you think that coming to Jesus means that you'll get all the secret answers to all the mysteries of life, you will be sorely disappointed. Because following Jesus isn't about getting all the answers to life. Following Jesus is about trusting and obeying Jesus even when you don't get the answers to why something happened. You ever been in a place called Why Land? Something bad happens to you and you're walking around going, why did this happen? Woe is me. Why? Sometimes the better question to ask is what? God, what do you want me to do? How can I trust you? Even if you don't get the answer. It always amazes me in the book of Job, which is an amazing story about someone who had so much and in a day the Lord allowed it to be all taken away. That story's always amazed me because at the end of the book of Job, when God shows up and speaks to Job, God never tells Job the exact reason that all of those things had happened. He never says to Job, hey, Job, one of the reasons all this came upon you is because Satan and I were having a cosmic battle in heaven to see how you would handle all this. God never says that to Job. Now, I believe that God told Job on the other side, just as I like to believe in our lives that we won't get all the answers to why things happen until we get to the other side. But in this life, often what it means to be a Christian is to trust God and obey God when you don't understand. When you don't understand, trust and obey. That's what it means to follow Jesus. If I'm allowed to give out homework, I'm going to do that now. And your homework, if you've not memorized Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, do it, because this is one of the most important passages in the Bible. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. That's what it means to follow Jesus. To not trust just your own mind or how you think everything should be handled, but to put your trust in the Lord and follow him, and he'll make your path straight. All right, here's the third lesson here. I cannot always be in control, but I can always be confident that God is in control. How many control freaks we got in here this morning? Don't raise your hand. Sorry. I can be that way too. Pastor Craig, the lead pastor who served here before me and was a mentor to me, I always remember what he told me as I was stepping into this role. He said, Billy, if you have to get your whole arms around the whole church, this church will only grow as far as your arms can reach. His point was if you have to control everything in this church, the church won't flourish because there's a chief shepherd who owns this church and you just have one role in this church. And it takes a lot of pressure off for me to think that way, that this is God's house, that I don't have to be in control. But some of us like to be in control. And here's what I found. The more we try to control everything in our lives, the more out of control our lives become. You ever experienced that? As soon as you get your arms around something, you think you understand it, you think you've got it under control, some other ball drops. That's just part of our lives. I mean, think about how little control we have. Did you choose what country you were born in? Did you choose who your parents are? Maybe you wish you did. Kids, don't look at your parents right now. Did you choose what family you were born into? Did you choose your ethnicity? Did you choose your height? I played basketball growing up. I tried to hang from one of those things to make myself taller. Didn't work. Did you choose your weight? Yeah, kind of. How much control do we really have? Not that much. Now, there are certain things in our life that we are called to steward, that we will give an account for how we steward. But the truth is, there's not that much in our control. There was a king named Jehoshaphat, not a great name in English, maybe it was better in Hebrew. King Jehoshaphat was going into a battle, and this is what he prayed in 2 Chronicles 20:12. He said, "O our God, will you not execute judgment on our enemies, for we are powerless against this great army that is coming against us." In other words, I'm not in control. I've prepared my army, but I'm not in control. But I love the end of his prayer. This is a great prayer for those times you don't feel in control. We do not know what to do, Lord, but our eyes are on you. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. If you feel like your life has gotten out of control, God can use that to teach you to depend on him, to build your prayer life. Have you ever heard that quote that says, "I do not know what my future holds, but I know who holds my future"? I cannot always be in control, but I can trust that God is in control. Time and chance redirect my trust. That's the purpose of it. We like to know what's going to happen next, but we won't ever know everything in this life. So it teaches us to trust God. Back in 2020, I mentioned to you that COVID had struck and the church I was serving at closed. And I'll never forget that because I thought I might work at that church. I was getting my master's degree at the time. I'd left finance and basically uprooted my whole life. And so it was a time of great uncertainty, and COVID was not helping that. And so at that time, I actually went to stay with my dad, who was in Oklahoma, and I only brought like 4 changes of clothes because I didn't realize COVID would last for years. And so I got out there, and I had to find a job. And I was praying a lot. I didn't know what was coming next. And then one day, I got this seemingly miraculous call from a church in Arizona. That church was planting a church during COVID, pretty amazing. And they had a staff position open. And there were not a lot of staff positions opening at churches during COVID. So I took it as fast as I could and drove out to Arizona. But the first few months out there were tough. I was serving as a director of students, but I'm a Midwest kid. I grew up in central Illinois in Peoria and spent time in Chicago and West Michigan. I'd never lived in a place like Arizona. Just desert and scorpions. It was terrible. In all seriousness, though, I was struggling. I felt lonely. And as I was leading this ministry, the student ministry, I remember one day I got a serving interest form from a girl named Ryan McLaren. Oh, some of you know. So Ryan came to meet with me, and what I would do with anybody who served in the ministry is I just get to know him. I was asking her questions, and she said, I really love to go on long runs and talk about theology. And I'm the only other person in the world who likes to do that. That's very interesting that she likes to do that. And as we kept talking, it started to feel like, boy, I don't know if she's going to serve in this ministry. She might end up serving 24/7 in ministry. But we ended up going on a jog later, and we were out for a while just talking. And I told her at the end of the jog, I said, hey, you can't serve in this ministry. I was saying that because I wanted to date her. She, to this day, tells me she thought I was saying it because I was friend zoning her. I was very clear. But then I got to know her story. Ryan's story is that when COVID hit, she had been in Scotland. It had been her dream to go get her master's degree in Scotland, and she had to come home with tears in her eyes because she had to leave Scotland because of COVID. And when she got back to Arizona, she got a job in a school, and then the school closed. And so just at her wit's end, she said, I should probably be serving in some place. And she went to her parents' church to try to find a serving opportunity in the student ministry. Perfect. And so that's how my wife and I met. And it's really amazing to me because I'm just a kid from the Midwest. She was a girl in Scotland, and God used the events of COVID to bring a chance encounter we would have never met if that meeting never happened. Not long after that, the Lord brought us out here to Iowa. And so here's what I've learned. In the moment of these seasons of time and chance, it can be really tough, can't it? Maybe you're here this morning, you are facing the sudden pressures and dangers of life. There is something that is happening in your personal life, in your family, in your workplace. You're thinking, where is God? How am I going to get through this? Take this message as an opportunity to redirect your trust back to God. Maybe as we close in a song this morning, you can take some time to say, God, I don't know why all this has happened. I don't feel in control, but I trust you. Because what I've seen God do over and over again through these things is not only bring us through surviving, but really make us thrive. And this building is a story of that. That we got this building in 2020, right when COVID hit, and couldn't even meet in the building. And now 5 years later, we're expanding the building. I mean, this is our God. And if you will trust him, I believe that he will bring blessings to your life. As the band's coming up, I want to give you the opportunity to make the most important decision you could ever make, which is to place your trust in Jesus. One of the reasons we have this great big cross behind me every Sunday morning is to remind all of us that without that cross and what Jesus did, none of us could be made right with God. So if you're listening here, you've never given your life to Jesus, all these lessons might be okay, but they won't save you. Only Jesus can save you. The Bible says that if you will confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. You'll have a relationship with your Father in heaven. You will have truly come home. If you're interested in coming to Jesus today, our pastors will be around, Pastor Max, Pastor Troy, and I. You can also cry out to Jesus on your own this morning as we close in worship.